Hello, and welcome to Warhammer 40k Book Club, Episode 3, in which we talk about Blood of Ajax by Robbie MacNiven.
Oh, crap, where did my book go? Here it is. Yes. I think it's Robbie
MacNiven?
MacNiven.
Please correct us.
It's by Robbie Mac.
Yeah. The guy from Always Sunny in Philadelphia. I like Always Sunny. So this book we chose quite by accident, serendipity. This was originally we were planning on going from Dark Imperium straight to Plague War, but I think in the post intestines hanging out pustules of Dark Imperium, we needed a little bit of a break. And Blood of Ajax, I think, arguably provided a pretty nice break in that it was very light. It was a little fluffier in so much as there's like a lot going on in Dark Imperium, and they're setting up a lot of stuff around in the world, and it's much more of a denser read. So we wanted something that was like the equivalent of a candy bar.
Well, it's let's see, it's 400 pages shorter than the last book. So
yeah, that's the other thing too. We wanted a something you could sit and eat in one sitting, as it were.
And it was a book that I had already got at the Black Library Celebration, and I was talking about it, and Jim was like, "Oh, but I want to read that book too," so we just figured might as well.
Yeah, my husband read it when it first came out, and he really, really liked it. We'll talk more about that in a second. But so when I had said, "Oh, I think Keri's going to read Blood of Ajax," oh yeah, you guys should definitely both read that. So glad we did. So let's dive on into it. First off, did you enjoy the book?
That's a loaded question, actually, because no. In the end, no. Like I was looking through my notes and I was like, I even wrote in here, like after I finished reading it, not really a fan of the book. But that's nothing to do with Robbie Mac's writing, because the orcs were very entertaining. I loved how he captured their dialogue. And he is a good writer. It's just, I didn't like the main characters. They just weren't compelling.
Yeah, and I think we talked about this before. For me, the orc chapters are A+.
Yeah, absolutely.
Enjoyed reading them. I got really excited when I saw Grim 2 for Urgok come up. I really liked the guard chapters, actually. Hanlon. I really liked those chapters. I got a little disappointed when I came upon a Castor or a Polixus chapter. So I felt as though the orcs were A+ material. The guard chapters were good. High B, A. The Space Marine chapters were more like C. And so it kind of, if you average that out, and we're not grading on a bell curve, it was like a high C, low B.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah, probably more like a C. And as you said, it's written well. Mechanically, it's really great. And I liked the concept of the overall story. It's nothing against Robbie MacNiven. He fell for the classic blunders. He made a villain, and it's the Black Panther syndrome. He made a villain infinitely more compelling than his hero. Urgork, it was just so much fun. And I think we'll talk about this a little bit more in a minute, but this is probably the first book I've ever read that was from the orc point of view.
I know it's mine.
It was so much fun. If I could have gone back in time and sat in on the pitch meeting for this, I would have told them just 100% orcs. Just 100% orcs. Just do it. Yes. And I think one of the things that I really did like about it too is that they managed to keep they made it so that it wasn't too hard to read the orcs. You could hear their dialect.
Yes.
You could hear the Cockney. You could some of the words. one of the pages that I had marked is when he was stumbling over the word abomination. Abomination.
Mm-hmm.
And you could hear him doing that, right? But it wasn't like, so on Reddit, when you read Orc Science, which, by the way, if you have not subscribed to the subreddit for Orc Science, do yourself a favor. But you have to, like, read it aloud to get the phonics of it, because it's just impossible to read. So he managed to balance that out so well. I could have read the whole book in Orc. It would have been amazing. Which I think brings us to, so that we can cut to that particular conversation. What was your favorite part of the book?
Oh, let's see. I don't know if, actually, no, I do have an answer. I don't remember the orc's name, but I remember it was a little one. It wasn't like, wasn't the doctor or one of the higher ups, but it was this, gosh, I wish I could remember his name, but this one, there was a thing where he was trying to get something out of, I guess, a workshop or something, and
Gretchen?
Yes, and he was trying to get away from a bigger orc, and was running through, and stuff fell on the bigger orc, and he was just like, oh, thank God I got away with it, and then bolts. Just that one little moment was like this really unique, looking at the dynamic of the orcs. It's like, because, normally when you read anything about the orcs, it's just, the constant killing and killing and killing. Yeah. And so, yes, that is all that they do. And they even say that they don't know what else to do. Like, that's just what they do. And they even talk about, how they don't understand the beakies and the humans, or the humies, because of, they want to build these things and, commune together. And they're all like, well, what are you doing if you're not crumping something?
Right.
So to me, it was a really nice way of just kind of seeing really how the whole dynamic works, from the little ones all the way up to the bigger orcs.
Yeah, and I don't know that I can point to a favorite scene either. Pretty much anything with the orcs. They, as you said, we don't typically get to see that. It's just this mindless horde of, and the orcs are terrifying. Like, and you see that in the human chapters. You see how terrifying the orcs are, because it's just this mindless force that's just there to kill. But it was funny to see those little scenes where, especially when they were confused, where they're just like, we just want a good crumpin'.
Right.
Like, why is this a problem? And so it was funny to see that from their point of view, that yes, they're not the brightest bulbs, and they are pretty, you could argue that they are fairly mindless in their want to just destroy stuff. But I think for me, and this is actually very early in the book, but it was probably, if I had to point to one favorite part, is when they describe the rock. Because I've always, like, I've heard of them before, right? And I think I've even seen it in a story before, but like, I haven't ever heard as good of a description of the rock as they give in there. And I just, his description of it was so perfect. I could picture just this big giant rock with a warp drive in it being pulled by a ship. I mean, it's the orkiest thing in the entire book. This
is the first time I've ever heard of the rock. And I laughed really hard. I'm like, only the orcs would come up with something like this.
I think that's, did I mark the page? I think he even says something like that too, where he's like, the person who's watching it is just like, only the orcs. And
it was effective.
Right. It was super effective. Pokemon references. The thing that I really liked, I think it's Xerxes, who's just like, this is the only thing that an orcs could come up with. The thing that I love about orc technology in general is that it only works in orc hands. And there's like a huge theory about why that is.
Because they're psychers. That's the theory I've heard. It's because they're psychers. Yeah. So because they believe it works.
It works.
It works.
Yeah, that's also the theory that I have heard. And I don't know if that's accurate, but it makes it so delightful. It just makes it so delightful. So, yeah. It would be hard
attaching a warp drive to an asteroid would not work.
Apparently, because they wanted to.
Yeah, Yeah, it would not work for normal humans and space marines and
No, not even a little bit. So how do the orc point of view chapters help or hinder the story? Which is, again, I think kind of a loaded question.
well, I mean, it totally. Man, I'm sorry, Robbie, but this story would have been boring with, without the orcs, and it's just because Castor and Polixis are just they are flat characters. Like they are just like when people think, I would get in arguments all the time with one of our friends who would talk about how he didn't understand why like the Ultramarines because they're all so boring and so stiff.
Right.
And yes, I understand that, but where I'm coming from, like I was reading Uriel Ventress, who is not flat at all, or Pausanias, his best friend, who is really a very dynamic character. And they're his mentor before he passed on his sword. So I've seen some different sides. Yes, but these guys are almost like if you took like the Ultramarine Codex, like as in the game Codex, this is these guys. Just
yeah,
here's
and
our mission.
we definitely want to dive into that more later because I think we had the same opinion on that and how very strange that was. Or actually, let's tackle that really quickly then. The Primaris Marines. So reading Dark Imperium, coming off of Dark Imperium, the Primaris Marines are a little more human and they're more akin to the Horus Heresy Marines than the OG Space Marines, right? I didn't get that opinion reading this.
No. The only almost humanizing thing about it is that these two, as what shocked me reading, see, where was that page? Oh, page 108, where they talk about how unlike the rest of the Primaris Space Marines, they were not Vat-born. I'm like, wait, hold on a second. So you're saying that Belisarius' call is just growing test tube babies like they did the Primarchs? They're making
damn it, I forgot. So that brings up a good point. When I read that, my first thought, I didn't know that was a thing. And I wanted to go back into Dark Imperium and double check that because I was pretty sure that one of the characters in Dark Imperium specifically talks about when he was recruited into the Primaris.
Yes.
They were kept in stasis and stuff over the years as
Felix.
They were being tinkered with.
Yes, Felix talked about that.
Yes. So and maybe it's possible that they, it was like a half and a half sort of thing where they recruited some and then they grew some, like a chia pet. But like sea monkeys, more like, I guess. But that line stuck out to me as being weird because I meant to research it and I totally forgot. That felt a little odd. I guess that was a little bit of a surprise to me.
Right, which then makes it even more surprising. So, all right, so you have these two guys who are literal blood brothers, which I thought was actually pretty cool that they both would be, recruited into the Ultramarines and be in the Primaris program. But considering they were from Ajax and in the Ultramar system, it's not like they would go to the Raven Guard or anything. But these two guys, though, who were human first, had the least personality out of any of the other Primaris Marines that they're with who are Vat-born. So just, and, they talk about, Castor mentions that, that Polixis doesn't remember anything of his human life, but yet, that's something that drove me crazy. It was like Castor said twice he's haunted by their childhood, but then they never say what it was that was so haunting.
Yeah.
And
that was a weird thing that kept coming up.
Yeah, because
like that one scene in which Polixis suddenly gets a memory of them laying on the ground looking at the stars, and why? Like when I read it, I was like, cool, and I thought it was going to come back, and somehow that seemed to be the way that he established that, oh, these two are brothers and they have this bond because they're getting memories of it.
Well, I was okay. So just the fact that Castor kept saying he said it twice, that he was haunted by their childhood. I was wondering, like, okay, so is this going to be the defining moment of why these guys are so interesting? Is what is when Polixus is captured? Is that going to bring back some memory of what Castor has to do? And it never happened. It never unfolded.
Mm-mm. No, and that was the thing too. So, as an aside, you said that there was a short story for it, and I was like, oh, maybe that's where all of this interest, or maybe they're setting it up to be. This does kind of read like the first entry into a series. This actually did remind me, in a lot of ways, it reminded me of that first Ultramarines book.
Well, I even made notes at the end. It's like, I mean, just because of the way that ended with the orcs, with that one, I don't remember his name, where he drags off the Gretchen, that I found so funny. Mm-hmm. It's like, well, obviously this is not over.
Right. Oh, I can't think of his name. It's like Scabrot or something like that.
Something like that, yeah. Yeah.
Cog Crusher. Doesn't he? Yeah, no, that was strange. It definitely felt. I would read the sequel if it was all the orcs. I would be so excited for it. Tell me what happens afterwards, especially since they take spoilers. They take Urgork's head, because that Cog Crusher grabs the head and he's dragging off with it. So I don't know. It was weird. It was this weird dichotomy of they kept going back trying to talk about their human childhood, but I have read several books that have chaplains in them. Castor felt like the most extreme and indoctrinated. In the beginning of the book, I actually kind of liked it because I thought it was a little funny, where in the very beginning, like the first scene that we get to see him, he's overextended himself because he just has the power of the Holy Spirit in him and he has to crush these orcs. And I thought that was great. The power of
Christ compels you.
Exactly. I thought that was actually great, right? Because I was like, oh yeah, look at this. He's totally into this. But then as the book continues to go on and he keeps talking about the Emperor's spirit, and that's even more extreme than most of the Ultramarines. And the Ultramarines, you can argue, are, well, actually, I guess from the religious standpoint, they're not even that big into it. He just felt even more indoctrinated than the Ultramarines did.
And at the same time, though, made this note, page 176, Castor was talking about the rigidity of the Codex and points out that the Codex, if they were going to follow the Codex to 100%, the Codex wouldn't allow the Primaris to exist.
Yes, he does acknowledge that.
Which is a really funny meme going on with Reboot Gulliman about, it's like, hey, you just violated your own Codex by making the Primaris Marines.
Well, Gulliman doesn't give a single shit. But yeah, I had that down there, that the view of the Codex and its teaching are more malleable and have become increasingly commonplace since the return of the Great Gulliman. It was the view often associated with the chapter's Primaris contingent, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, so there was this weird, I guess.
And Castor even points out how that when you command, you're always going to be in error of the Codex, which just goes against like everything the Ultramarines go for. So you have this, Southern Baptist on high, yet what rules, whatever. So he's kind of like got that dichotomy.
He actually, you know what? I think you nailed it. He feels more like he would be more in line with the ecclesiarchy than with the Ultramarines. He definitely felt more like a Southern Baptist, where it's fire and brimstone and those laws and rules and stuff. That's not as important as the rules of the spirit or what religion aspect. And
whereas Polixus is actually the other way.
Right. And he feels more like, to me, he feels more, Polixus feels just, I don't know how to word this. He feels, that's the one, like when you were talking about how flat they felt, Castor had a personality. I just didn't particularly like his personality. Polixis doesn't even really feel like he has a personality. It was, so I know I quote this a lot, but it's one of my favorite game series, so back off. There is a quote from Ben Yahtzee Crawshaw when he's talking about Dead Space, and he talks about Isaac Clarke and how, you know, he's all sad because his girlfriend has died, and he's like, oh, it's like asking me to feel sad for a brick because it's lost its brick children and its brick wife, and because he didn't have any personality. And that's, reading this with Polixis, I kept thinking about that when he's like, I remember my childhood. I was like, oh, the brick had a childhood, because there just wasn't a lot there to him, I didn't think. Well, I guess, and again, going back to the question about the orcs, it kind of hindered it because the orcs have so much personality.
Or was it serving as, let's look at these differences. Like, you know, here the orcs do have this personality, and then here's these two who really don't. Although what I was going to say before my youngest son decided to come in and ask me a question. So, like we said with Castor, he's got, you know, the dichotomy of the fire and brimstone preacher, but yet rules whatever. Whereas Polixis is like, these are the rules. This is the codex. I am following this. And if you do read the short story Brother's Confession, which is actually it's the prequel to this. It's actually what got him started writing this. It's 100% Polixis. Basically, he would be that confessing Catholic already flogging himself because he didn't follow this one rule. And that's how opposite they are. It's almost like Polixis doesn't have the same spirit as Castor, but he's definitely more of, this is what I have to do at all times. And it's like, even when he's captured by the orcs, he doesn't even try to play anything off. He doesn't even try to be like, oh, sure, yeah, I'll help you, and then try to escape. He's just like, nope, you're an abomination, and there's no way I will. It's like, dude, like, bend a little bit, like, try to get them on your side, and then try to escape. Nope, he was just, nope, not going to do it.
Yep. Which, well, I guess that actually does feel a little bit in line with the Ultramarines, because, yeah. So I guess it was, maybe it was just, I just didn't like the characters that much.
Mm-hmm.
And again, so I think in some ways, so this is the dichotomy of the book, right? Is that the orc chapters help, because one of the things I've always liked about the orcs, and I don't know who thought this up at Games Workshop, but this person was absolutely brilliant. Whoever thought to themselves, oh, orcs should be Cockney. Brilliant. And they're hilarious. Their technology's hilarious. Their lookout, their view of things is hilarious. Their very nature is very funny. I mean, in a macabre kind of way, right? Like, yes. They're killing each other, and then they're just like, anyways, right?
Right. Well, it's like my very first experience with them, of course, was playing Warhammer 40,000 Space Marine.
Oh, right.
And I would go back and forth between, like, you know, basically like bending over my knees in my lap, laughing at what the orcs were saying, to being utterly terrified as I was being overrun and couldn't activate my fury fast enough to heal myself.
Right. Well, it makes them a great enemy, because they are terrifying, especially in this book. Actually, I think this book, one of the things they really did well, especially with the human chapters, is capturing how tough and unkillable these things are. It really is like fighting a space marine, because they're big and they don't really feel pain like we know of it, and they have no fear of dying. And yeah, I mean, they can take several bullets. These guys are not,
mm-hmm.
and they're not, it's like fighting a space marine. And they captured that horror of it, but they're still funny, because I don't have to view them. Again, would you like to live in your fantasy universe? No,
not so much. Did you ever read Shrike?
I did, yes.
Well, I remember early on, and in that, and I think it was someone in the Raven Guard was actually, you know, researching the orcs, and they were talking about how their nervous system is set up in a way that their pain sensors are scattered everywhere, so you have no idea where to shoot to make it hurt. They said the only way to do it is to shoot off their head. That is
Yep.
the only way for them to slow down and to feel pain, because then they're absolutely dead.
Right. Yeah, exactly. But again, and I think like outside of the books, we get to see the humor of them, because especially if you look at like the names of their figures and their armies, and obviously on Reddit, there's so many memes with them. They're hilarious.
I mean, you gotta love a group that has something actually called Weird Boys, and they're serious.
I love the Weird Boys. Well, and I just like the fact that they refer to themselves as boys. It's just great. Like, they are a really funny, and yeah, Warhammer 40k Space Marine, that game was probably the first one where I was like, oh, we're actually getting to hear them like really, really see how they interact and how they work. And so that's one of the reasons that this will remain just an awesome like reading experience for me, was because getting to see things from their point of view and like hearing that inner working of what how they're looking at the what. Okay, this is for anybody watching, the pronunciation. I do know the correct pronunciation.
Oh, you did?
Loud.
Oh
no, loud and in a growly voice, but wog, wag, waga, wog. I'm going with wog for now.
Yeah, that's what I've always said. I need to, anybody who has listened to any of the audiobooks, I need just to check in with our friend Drew, because he listens to the audiobooks all the time. I know he's heard it.
Oh yeah, whatever they say for this book in there, I'd love to know. But actually hearing like their thought process on the wog and why they're doing this and what's going on here, that was...
There's no why. They just want a good crumpin'. That's all there is to it.
That's amazing! Oh, like listening to them just being like, we're just trying to crump. Like, we're just trying to destroy everything. And their words for everything. I love beakies and humies. And yes, the Weird Boys are easily one of my favorites. But everything, Pain Boys too. So that is wonderful because it helps so much. But as you said, it helps because that makes the book really fun to read. But then the Space Marine chapters just can't keep up. Because you have this like funny, oh my God, what is happening right now? And then the next scene is, we must follow the rules and we must do this. And I'm very serious right now.
With us actually talking about it, I'm actually wondering now if that was done on purpose.
It might have been actually, just to show that, because now that I'm thinking about it, it does show that these guys are just crazy. Mm-hmm. It is, and it's funny because they're not chaos per se, but it's chaos. It's anarchy. Like, it's just the way that they behave and they think. Yeah, it's straight up anarchy, which is funny, right? And then you get to go back and see order. So, helps.
Right. But then you jump into the guards' point of view. And I like that because, like, oh, here's like an entirely different perspective on what is going on, especially Hanlon, because she doesn't seem to appreciate the Space Marines being there at all.
No, and so I really liked the guard chapters because on one hand, so on multiple hands here, it really showed an interesting facet. So on one hand, it showed just the animal horror that the orcs would instill, right? Mm-hmm. Especially, like, I think that one of the first chapters in which we meet Hanlon, she is just running for her life. Running scared, running terrified, and they talk about, I think it's Polixus who lifts her up off the ground, and she doesn't even really know what's going on at that point. So you have the Space Marines who are, okay, this is an enemy, we're going to deal with it. One of our guys just died, it's cool, we'll get his gene seed, let's keep going. And then you have the guard who are actually a little bit more terrified because they actually are afraid of dying, so to speak. And so I really liked that, but I agree with your assessment, is that she was a little in awe of the Space Marines, obviously, because most people are, but she also did seem to have this, I think it's her end chapter where she's like, yep, and okay, now that they're gone, they're leaving.
Well, I mean, because she talks about, like, whose idea was this, like, is more of, not that, I probably phrased it wrong. It's not that she didn't appreciate them being there. She just did not agree with the decisions they were making.
Right. No, I would agree with that completely.
And I think in many ways she was right, because it did kind of seem that the Marines were throwing humans as meat shields while they were doing their thing.
Operation Get Behind the Humies. I mean, it was South Park references.
Oh my god.
A little off color. But
no pun intended.
Well, but it is, right? Because that's one of the great, and I think I like books like this that really show that, is that's one of the Imperium is basically Russia. They've got all of the bodies in the world to throw at a problem. And they don't, I mean, human life in the grimdark future is very cheap.
Right, I think it's what, I don't remember if you said it on this podcast, but you said it to me before, where that, the Imperium is about mankind, not man individually.
Yes.
And it's funny because I was telling my husband actually about your favorite Ultramarines book, the one with the Tau. And and I was, kind of going over it with him, and I said, how they were able to stop it was that basically they said, you can either leave on your own, or we will exterminate this planet, because we'd rather everyone here die than to be under your rule. Which Sean was like, whoa, that's harsh. Like, yeah, at the time reading, I was like, damn, like, that's really over extreme, but that just shows how serious they are, that they would rather lose everybody on that planet than to possibly lose mankind to the Tau.
Well, right, because they know that the Tau, and this is literally with the Tau because they use mind control in their, to get people to follow them. If you lose one planet to them, they'll just start hop, skipping, and jumping.
Oh yeah, it's like an infection.
Yeah, exactly. And absolutely. They will sacrifice an entire planet rather than let the Tau have one foothold. So it's extreme, but it's true.
Mm-hmm.
They're definitely usually I complain when people don't see the forest for the trees. They've forgotten that there's even trees in there.
Oh yeah. Well, it's like even Reboot said in Dark Imperium, when that priest is like, did he love us? Did he love us? And he was like, no.
Well,
he didn't say it, but in his mind he's like, no, he loves mankind.
So I mean, so technically, yes,
not you individually,
but not you. He doesn't give a shit about you individually. Like, just so we're clear. No, it's again, it's the Obi-Wan argument. It's true from a certain point of view.
Mm-hmm. Yes, which is what Reboot went with, and he was like, yeah, yes,
yes, question mark. Yeah, and I think the Guard chapters did a good job with that. They definitely had more personality. And maybe it's because I really like the Gaunt's Ghost series. I have like a ton of Gaunt's Ghosts over here. Maybe it's because I really like the Gaunt's Ghost series. I really like the Guard in general. So I liked seeing them in this. And again, it gives that, I guess literally, more human element to it, and it makes it a little bit more relatable. Because sometimes it's hard when you're reading, especially like with the Castor chapters.
Mm-hmm.
No frame of reference to this character. Well, I have no common ground with this person at all.
Right.
Really. So, I thought it was a really good turn of events in it. I think the ones that so you have Castor and Polixis, and then you start to, and I apologize, on the post that we put online for our discussion, I used the wrong word. I put Vanguard instead of Reaver. But you also have these Reaver Space Marine chapters, where these are the guys who, still Space Marines, but they're scouts. So they're a little bit lighter armored. And those guys definitely seem to have, like Severus, I think, had much more personality.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, because I questioned a few times. I'm like, are these with the same group? Because they don't seem to go together. Yeah.
Yeah. No, completely. And they were different. They definitely had more of I think they were different from the other Primaris Space Marines that we've seen in general too. They had, well, I guess, is scouty, like much more scouty mindset. Like they seemed a little bit, I usually hate this word, but scrappier than the regular Space Marines.
Yeah. It's almost like they had a little bit of Raven Guard in them. Because they were fast, they got in, they didn't mess around, and they were out.
Yes.
Chicks, you think Teen Titans Go in and out.
Yes, Robin would have been proud.
Yes.
Yes, they do. Well, the scouts, I feel in general, always feel a little bit more Raven Guardy because, you know, yeah, to your point, they're just like, we're going to get in, we're going to get out, we're not messing around, we got one job. And so I liked that. They felt a little bit more no nonsense, but also, yeah, having more of a personality. So I think if I had to point to my favorite character in the whole book, it would probably be Severus for the home team. I really liked Grimtooth.
Yes, he was mine.
So the part that I knew that I was going to like this character is in the beginning when, who's the orc? Stabscar. When he gets killed and he vomits up all over his poncho.
Oh, God. You know, all right. Hold on a second here. So what is up with, like, all the vomiting and, it's like every book I read. Like right now I'm reading False Gods and, you know, book 2 of the Horus Heresy, and I got to the Plague Planet. I was like, God, why? Why can I not get away from this? And they're describing that. Like it wasn't as stomach turning as like the Plague Marines and the Plague Demons, but man, what a horrible way to go. You're vomiting up your liquefied organs.
Honestly, I had a moment when I was reading about it that I had to take a step back. Like I put the book down and I was like, this might be the most horrific death we've seen in a while in these books. Like I was trying to think of, because I think in Dark Imperium, when the one guy starts to turn to, remember the guardsman who we've been following with the group with the 1-1-1.
That wasn't nearly as bad.
That's what my first thought is. I was like, oh yeah, that guy went pretty badly. And then I was like, you know, actually, it wasn't as graphic. So
at least he was laughing.
Congratulations, Robbie MacNiven. You outdid Dark Imperium in terms of graphic deaths. Yeah, even reading it, I was like, ew. But so he's given the poncho that the guy just vomited himself up in, right? And he's kind of holding it. But then he goes out to talk to the troops and he throws it on. And at that point, I was like, I like this guy. Because it's so repugnant. But unapologetically repugnant, and not in the my intestines are dangling out of me kind of way.
Yeah. So at least there wasn't that, I guess. That was again, that was probably, and it's so early in the book, but it was one of the few, it was a scene that I was not expecting that level of violence. Well, I had a feeling he was going to kill him. Yeah. But I didn't think it would be like that. And I think really the funniest part, aside from him like suddenly just walking over there and picking up the cloak and throwing it at Grimtooth, was the other orcs who were doing everything they can to get away from this pool of stuff that's just forming. So I think I loved this scene because when I was a kid, we used to watch Gremlins 2 over and over and over again. And I still love it as an adult, because if you ever want like a really great Hollywood story, look up the story behind Gremlins 2. I promise you it'll give you new appreciation for the movie. But at the end of the movie, for people who haven't seen it or who don't remember it, they have all of these gremlins in a hotel room, or like a atrium. No, it's a office building, atrium. And they end up getting them wet. And if you remember, gremlins start popping out new gremlins, kind of like an orc. And then they electrocute them. And so
It's such a disgusting scene, but like a 12-year-old, I loved it. As they're melting and they're bubbling and they're still talking, and it's so gross because just this flesh is just melting, and that's all I could picture was the scene from Gremlins 2 with this guy melting down. So I actually found the scene shocking because, again, I was like, I was not expecting this, but it like triggered this memory of watching Gremlins 2 in my mind, and I was like, I love this, which I think is why when he put the cape on, it was like, I'm in charge now. That's a good guy. Boy.
Good boy, yes.
He's one of the good lads. But I keep coming back to the fact that was so much fun. And then I went back to going back to the Space Marines. I was always like, oh. Well, I don't know how to, I guess it's like, so the way that it made me feel was, I think it's season 2 or it might be season 3 of Game of Thrones. They utterly destroyed Daenerys' character. Her dragons get stolen, and she spends the entire season screaming at the top of her lungs, "Where are my dragons?" Hated it. So we would be watching Game of Thrones, and that was back when I was still watching it and enjoying it.
That reminds me, now you're making me think of Christian Bale, of just like, where's the trigger?
In the constipated voice. Yeah. And so, but like, it reminded me of how I would love to watch everything that was going on, and then they would get to a scene with Daenerys, and my first reaction would be, this again. So when I was reading, and I would get to the end of an orc chapter, and then it would say, Castor. Oh. Right. Which I think is credit only because you should not be rooting for the orcs under any circumstances. So the fact that I was every time, it's like,
well, I wouldn't say rooting for him. It was just, more fun to read. I mean, oh no, I wasn't rooting for him. Like, I was still happy. I was still happy when, the Marines saved the day. In the Marines' way, they took care of the threat, and they were like, well, have fun cleaning it up.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And vamos.
Right, which is kind of, that's why I don't think your point was entirely inaccurate about Hamlin, because sure enough, at the end, when they're like, okay, this is done, enjoy, we're out. They dropped a rock onto this planet.
From space.
This planet's a little messed up right now. And I know that that's not, this is one of the things where I kind of go back and forth on this one, because I know technically that's not the Space Marines' problem.
Right.
Not the diplomats that Reboot, Gilliman, and everybody else imagined they would be someday. But part of me was like, guys, can't you at least, like, I don't know, pick up some statues or something? Do something.
On the way out?
Yeah, like, write a statue and then be like, we did something. They did a lot. I'm not gonna say they didn't. But that's always one of the things I think we've talked about it with the Magos, and I think we talked about it in Dark Imperium too, where these
they kind of remind me of the fire department.
Yeah.
The fire department is there to put out the fire and make sure that you are safe.
Yeah.
And then they're like, well, later. Sorry that your house is like 3 feet of water in it. You got all this burn damage and whatever. But, we did our part and now we're leaving.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, that's pretty accurate. Like, we did our part. So the thing that I keep going back over is that Urgork had a plan he needed Belixis for. He gets Belixis. The story then becomes about a brother going to hunt for his brother. I'm not sure. So here's the question I would pose to you that I would pose to anybody who read this. Did it really matter that they were blood brothers?
I think so in a way, because I don't see the chaplain leading the charge for a rescue mission like this.
Right.
they would have sent, the Reavers, in and out. Because they would have needed the apothecary. And even their captain, or their sergeant who was now acting as captain, was even saying, it's like, I can't lose you too. You have to stay here. And then Castor went on ahead. There's no way a chaplain would have gone on ahead after any other Marine when he was ordered not to, unless he was blood brothers. Because again, only Castor has those memories of them being like blood brothers. Like, and at that moment where he does save him, you could tell Polixis, he's like, yes, we're here. He's here. We're together again, type thing. So it's like that moment that Polixis kind of feels that he's always kind of felt this bond, but he doesn't have those memories to kind of, seal in this bond. But at the same time, when that all was happening, I was like, get a room. So I brought this up with something else, but I'm going to talk about this other anime that I talked about all this time called Escaflowne. The reason why I'm going to bring it up this time is because this centers around two brothers. One is on the bad side because something went wrong. Yeah. And then you have the lead character. Well, every single time the lead character comes across his brother, because he has decided he was going to kill him. In Japanese, I'm sure the line is like, Oni-san or something like that. But in English, was what I saw it, he's like, brother! Every time he comes in. And that's what this reminded me of. Every time they came in somewhere, I was imagining one of them just yelling that.
That's accurate. That's entirely accurate. So I guess it felt like we were constantly being told they were brothers, but I didn't really feel that it mattered per se. To your point, I think they still probably would have rescued their apothecary,
but it wouldn't have been the chaplain.
Right. It wouldn't have been the chaplain going to do it. And I don't know if that really made a difference. Like, I don't know what I was expecting, but it is so unique to have two blood brothers be in this unit together. I guess I don't know what I was expecting with it, but I was expecting, I think, a little bit more.
I guess, but again, like we were saying, the reason why Polixis was captured was far more fascinating than the rescue.
Yes, I would agree with that, but that also goes towards the orcs just being a little bit more interesting.
Right.
Right. Do you want to give us the summary of why he was captured?
Oh, well, so the big bad, what's his name? Urgork. I don't think he was like a real orc. He was like a Frankenstein. A literal Frankenstein that had been stitched together. Because they talk about how, like, even his flesh is all different colors of green because he's been stitched together from different...
So, one of the things to know about orcs is that if an orc has his arm cut off, he can go over to another dead orc, grab his arm, and slap it on, basically.
Well, yeah, and...
They're disgusting.
And basically, he's kind of a hodgepodge. Like, I think they talk about how one leg is longer than the other, the arms don't match. And of course, like, he's like even split down the middle of his face with the different colors, and he's got two different colored eyes, and Plex all the time is like, ugh, like, orcs are gross, but that's pretty bad. But he's not well, which kind of made me wonder how he's even the war chief in the first place, because when he has one of his seizure moments and the pain boy's not around, that's plenty of opportunity for those other orcs to come in and just off him, because he would get these seizures and they wouldn't be like like an epileptic fit. It would be just the comatose frozen seizures, and his doctor would have to give him an injection, but they were coming on more and more frequently because basically his body was rejecting this whatever it was. And he saw he's seen so many apothecaries out there stitching people back together and bringing them back to life, and they know so much about medicines. He's like, well, I want one to fix me.
Which is great. Well, so did you read the Chains of Did you read Yarrick? I think it's the Chains of...
I've not read anything Yarrick.
Okay, so there's a short story. I want to say it's Chains of Golgotha, but I can't think of what it is. But anyways, he they talk about how some of the orcs, once they get like really old and they've been around for a while, they do start to notice stuff and get a little smarter. Most of them just don't live that long. So the reason that I've always loved that story is at the very end, Yarrick is captured. He keeps trying to escape. The orcs keep tying him back up. And then finally at the end, oh God, Graza Thraka? Yeah, Thraka. I can't remember the rest of his name, but an orc boss, like a really ancient orc boss, comes over and he grabs Yarrick and he says to him in perfect high Gothic, "You are my greatest enemy. Good enemies are hard to find. I'll see you at the Armageddon." And then kind of lets him go. But the fact that he spoke to him in perfect high Gothic, he was like, oh no.
And he was probably also a massive giant, because they talk about how the orcs never stop growing, which is why the war chiefs are the war chiefs, because they're the biggest. If they get to live that long to be that big.
Yeah, I think Thraka is described as being like Primarch sized at this point. And he's mostly metal too. But they have a
Typical.
figure for him. He's pretty cool looking. But yeah, I mean, it's little things like that I actually thought was, I actually would have liked them to dive, gone into that a little bit more. Well, they went into it a pretty good amount, I think. I liked, and I did love, actually, I loved the scene when Polixus is like, "I'm never going to help you." And Urgok is like, "Yeah, okay, I kind of figured that out now." I realize that. So, question. Will this make a good movie?
No.
I think you're right. And I think this would make a good movie for fans, only because the orcs are really fun, but you really have to have more than a passing knowledge of, you really have to have a pretty good knowledge of Warhammer 40k for it, I think, to really appreciate what's going on.
The only way this would be good is if you had hardly anything about the Marines. It did not matter about Castor and Polixus being related. There'd be the mystery of why they were trying to seek after, this apothecary. And then you find it out, but then I don't know what a good conclusion would be. I mean, it'd be kind of, let down no matter what. But if you had like any focus on the Marines themselves or even on the Guard, I think you would lose any potential for this, because if you're going to focus on the Guard to get that perspective, well, then you're going to have to focus on the whole picture, and I don't think the whole picture is very good to be on the screen.
I agree. So usually I like to talk about, who would you cast as this? I'm not sure I would cast it. I don't think that'd make a great movie. If anything, I would love to hear the orcs talk. Absolutely love to hear that. But that's about the extent.
Right. Bring those voice actors back from a Space Marine game.
Oh my God, that'd be amazing. I think wasn't Fred Tatasciore, wasn't he one of the voices in that?
He could have been.
Because he does that good, deep, growly voice.
You need a growly voice. You call Fred. I mean, that's just...
Right. Yeah, since Frank is getting a little old. So, I mean...
No, you call Frank when you want a drunk dishwasher underwater.
Good reference. So, overall, I would say that I don't regret having read it.
No, I don't regret it either. It's just far from one of my favorites.
Right, and I was trying to think about, like, in terms of, since everybody knows I wrote, well, if you don't know, visit warhammer40kbookclub.com for our guide. I always like to tell people, like, the order of books I would read and, like, suggestions for, well, if you want to know about this, read this.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I would say, like, look, if you really want a fun orc book, this is going to scratch your orc itch. And let's pretend I didn't say that. But that's about it. I wouldn't recommend it to anybody who was looking for a great Primaris story. I definitely wouldn't point to this for anybody who wants to know what Primaris Space Marines are.
No, because I think I told you, because I was going to read this before Dark Imperium.
Right.
But then we formed the book club thing. I was like, okay, I'll wait. Well, after the first 2 chapters, I am so glad I read Dark Imperium first, because I would be like, who? What are these
Right.
people?
What's a Primaris? Yeah, this book is definitely assumes that you know what's going on in the post Cadia world.
Well, either you read Dark Imperium or you've read the new Codex.
Yes. You know the score.
Mm-hmm.
Because they don't, I mean, they make some passing references to the Primaris, but they don't really explain who, what, when, where, why, how.
Right.
So I feel, honestly, I think that, and I might even put that on the guide as an update. Dark Imperium is the starting point for Primaris. For me, I feel like it gives the best explanation with a good story that's moving forward and doing something.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, this would definitely, if you want a fun orc story, this is your Huckleberry.
Yeah, I mean, I recommend this just for a different perspective on the orcs.
Yeah.
And maybe you don't think that you'd want one. Well, just go to, like she said, go to Reddit, go to Orc Science, read that. I'm like, okay, now you do want a different perspective. Well, here you go.
Yeah, and if you're thinking to yourself, I've read Orc Science, I don't think I really want to read a whole book like that. It's much better than that. And again, as I said, the dialogue, it's Cockney, but it's like, it's not over exaggerated. It's not Eliza Doolittle. It's more like Basher from the Oceans, or actually, the good example would be like, it'd be anybody out of the movie Snatch, but not Brad Pitt's character, who, as an American, when he talked, I was like, what? It's easy to read.
Oh, the directors don't know what he said either. Like a friend of mine, they were watching that movie and they're like, we're going to put some subtitles so that we know what he's saying. They said some parts are just question marks.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And, but yeah, that part was fun. But other than that, I have to say, I'm excited. I'm more excited for our next book. I think this was a really good break after reading the Magos and a good break from Dark Imperium. But I'm more excited to read our next book, which is Dark Imperium Plague War by Guy Haley. Direct sequel to Dark Imperium. So if you haven't yet read that, definitely go back, do the thing. But we will be talking about this. We'll be having a post on the website with all of our questions that we're going to talk about. Follow along with us. I think this one, I'm really excited for this one. My husband already read this. This is the fun story in our house, is that we buy 2 copies of books because he buys them on iBooks and I don't have an iPad. And I'm not reading on a phone.
And iBooks sucks, people.
It does, but my husband...
I know. He's special.
Well, being Gen X, really uses technology like a boomer. So
he's special.
He's very special.
He's still living in the analog childhood.
Yes, pretty. I mean, he just got a smartphone like a year and a half ago. But I am so excited to read this. He has been like, "Are you reading it yet? Are you reading it yet?" So, really excited for it. Mostly, I'm not gonna lie, I'm excited to see more Mortarion.
Yeah, I mean, because I've never even heard of the Death Guard, really, until, I'm sorry, I'm so behind on all this stuff, but I'm catching up as fast as I can. And
well, we were talking the other day randomly about Space Marine chapters that I kind of forget exist sometimes. Like, when I start listing off the chapters, I often forget that the Iron Hands are a thing. Forget about the White Scars a little bit, the Space Mongolians. I forget that the Word Bearers exist. That's probably intentional because I hate Lorgar. I do occasionally when I'm going through and I'm like, oh, there's all these. And then I have to like go by the 4 Chaos Gods. That's the only reason I can remember that the Death Guard exists.
Well, because in most of the stuff that I've read, let's see, the Ultramarines didn't really deal with chaos. Say the Tyranids. Well, yeah. No,
the Iron Warriors.
The Iron Warriors. So
they're Chaos Undivided.
Right. Or like in the Eisenhorn, that was also, I think, Chaos Undivided, because they just talked about the Chaos Space Marines. They didn't say what faction. So, I mean, I knew of Nurgle, but I didn't know about the Death Guard, per se.
Well, and I think
more intestines. Are you going to drop any more, like, dead whales, Guy Haley? Because I can't deal with any more whales.
I thought the whale was so amazing. It was so funny to me that you and I had such polar opposite. Like, I got to the end of that book and was like, I want to paint a Death Guard army. And you were like, I don't ever want to read this ever again. So I thought it was really funny. But, you know, for me, the biggest thing, the thing that I'm most excited about this book is something that they touched on in Dark Imperium, was that, so I had always looked at, because I had Magnus as an example, and Fulgrim, and Angron, that I always assumed that here you have these demon princes who worship this absolutely. And Mortarion was always a little weird because he was so opposed to psychers and magic, and he was the biggest advocate for the Council of Nicaea. And so it was always a little weird to me that then he became a demon prince, and it looks like maybe things aren't well in their home currently, since he and Typhus are directly fighting each other. I'm so excited. I'm so excited for this book. So
and he has his adopted father's soul in a jar,
as one does.
I don't know why I said anything. Makes sense to me.
When you when you ascend to a demon prince, maybe you'll put your dad's soul in a jar so you can talk to it every day. I mean,
okay, if I'm gonna become a demon prince or princess, it's not gonna be to Nurgle, because that's nasty shit.
Well, he got wings. So,
I don't care.
This is one of the jokes that I always make, is that, so like Fulgrim turns into a snake and has extra arms, and
he becomes a tentacle monster.
He becomes hentai.
Yes.
And Angron becomes just this rage monster, right? Where it's just this rah! And let's see, Magnus really, really leans into the demon with the giant horns and everything, and Mortarion got wings. Like, I feel like in terms of mutations, he got off pretty light, actually.
Yeah, but he has to look at all that. I'd be constantly puking. No.
Actually, the looks wouldn't bother me so bad as the smell.
You know, and I said this on Twitter, but, you know, Guy Haley, you are an amazing writer, because I swear to God, in reading Dark Imperium, I could smell it. That's just how deep how expressive he was able to get. And like I was telling you the other day, I was getting into a Twitter thing between him and Graham McNeil, because I was reading about the Plague Planet and False Gods, and I was like, my God, this is just nasty. What is wrong with you two? And they're both bantering with me, and they're making everything worse. And then I realized I'm eating yogurt while talking to them. Like, this is a mistake. This is awful.
Oh yeah, when I was reading Dark Imperium, one of my cats decided that then was a really good time to hork up dinner, and I was just like, really? It's thematically fitting, and it, like, usually that doesn't bother me, but it really bothered me after that.
Now you really can smell it.
Yes. But do you want to take us out, Keri?
Yes, I think I will. So, yes. So, get ready. Plague War. I just happened to notice on the back this is going to be a trilogy, so book 2.
Yes.
I know, I'm pretty excited about that.
Yes. Queen of Nurgle. Would you say yes, or would it be more like a blah? Blah, queen.
I think you would just yell ashes.
All is dust.
All is dust. Yeah. So.
No, wait, never mind.
So yeah, so next book is going to be a Plague War. If you have any other books, we've actually already kind of made a list of what we are going to be reading, but we will take suggestions. If you guys, if there's any books out there, you're like, okay, you guys have to read this. Do not recommend anything in Horus Heresy out of order, because I won't do it. That's just not me. But really anything, like, I don't care. Like, we'll read about, Imperial Guardsmen, about, Chaos Gods, anything. If you have any suggestions whatsoever, we will happily take it under advisement, because Lord knows we need to give more money to Black Library and Amazon to give us more books.
We both ordered books to get here by Mother's Day, to give you an idea. It's a gift that keeps on giving. Yeah,
and I might have already owned one because I'm an idiot, so I might be giving one of those away.
Which one?
Black Legion.
Anyways.
I need to, look at my library before I buy anything. It's the second time I've done that. Anyway, so thank you all again for, viewing, listening to us. Of course, you can find us on the website. We're also on YouTube. You can find the podcast, just the audio part, also on the website, but on iTunes and Google Podcasts and Stitcher. You can follow Jen and I on Twitter. I'm at Crunchy Chocobo. She is at Jen Bozier. And the website is at WH40k Book Club. And so I guess we'll come back in about... we've been reading things pretty quickly, so I don't know if we can do like a month, but we'll be back like probably in a few weeks.
Yeah,
to do
maybe.
this. Like, how long is this one?
It's not very long,
No.
and I'm real excited to read it.
No, it's not. I mean, honestly, after reading the Magos in like 2 weeks, like anything else just feels like that's no big deal. So we might be like doing like bi-monthly instead of just monthly. That's kind of crazy, but it's going to be so much fun. So, and with that, I guess we'll just see and talk to y'all in a few weeks. Pick up the Plague War. If you haven't picked up Dark Imperium, read that one first.
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Grab it. Get hype.
Very excited. All right. With that, say good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody. We read from a crag.
That's right. We do read from a crag.